Good afternoon, Vandal fans, and welcome to another edition of Fourth and Downtown. I'm your host, Josh Grissom, and I'm joined with Luis the Godfather Torres. We're here to discuss some spring football, some lacrosse, and just, kind of discuss Vandal sports in general. So, how are you doing this afternoon, Luis?
Well, it's one of those typical Idaho weathers today. It was rainy, a little bit of hail, some slush, but right now, beautiful, some clouds in the mist, about 43 degrees, 5 mile an hour winds. It's been a pretty good Friday so far, and it's going to continue this way.
And it's good. It's a good Friday for Vandal football fans because the team just began spring practices yesterday afternoon in the KUOI Dome, and it's good to see some of the guys back on the gridiron, some new faces, also the loss of some very important players, and some interesting hires by the Vandal football team. So let's just jump right into the football team. Idaho head coach Paul Petrino held a press conference Tuesday to kind of discuss the setup of the team and the spring practices, and perhaps probably the biggest news was that sophomore quarterback Matt Linehan, kind of the standout for the Vandals last year, will not be practicing with the team this spring due to a foot injury. Petrino said the injury occurred last season during team activities, but Linehan continued to play through. He is currently wearing a medical boot if you see him around campus, and he is not expected to rejoin the Vandals until the summer months. So what does that mean? That means that backups Jake Luton and Gunnar Amos will split time at the position for the entirety of March, which is kind of interesting because then you have not only these players trying to fight for key positions and to get repetitions on the field, but they're doing that without perhaps their leader in Linehan.
Yeah, it's gotta be a tough break to not have Linehan for the duration of spring football. Obviously, he has toughed it out, and obviously the biggest thing going into next season is gonna have to rest and stay healthy. So that's probably the one wise decision to do. They kind of keep Linehan healthy. But as far as the quarterback battle, you have a guy like Jake Luton who's had experience on the gridiron at a collegiate level, especially like a couple that comes to my mind is when he played against Southern California in last September.
And Auburn. I believe he played against Auburn too.
Yeah, he's been in those big situations, playing those really tough and top-notch teams from the Pac-12 and the SEC respectively. So he has the experience. Now, I think this is going to be a time where Luton's going to have to make a name of himself during spring, and other people who may have not seen Luton played at the KUOI Dome all that much.
Now, I know a lot of people just believe that Linehan is the quarterback for the team and that there's no doubt that Linehan will remain the starter. But I have heard whispers, and I've talked to some reporters who say Luton has a better arm than Linehan. The problem is Luton just doesn't have that experience and the game-time quickness to make the decisions that are needed to be made, which is something that Linehan has. Now, my question, I guess, watching the spring practices, if Luton really excels, does that make Coach Petrino take a step back and think, maybe I ought to reevaluate who is the starting quarterback?
I think you will have to look and reevaluate, but Luton has to really have a nice, kind of excel in fly colors, make some of those adjustments, try to be a little bit more quick, because that's one of the things that I've noticed about Luton. He seems to not go a little bit quick, but he is effective when he is, compared to Linehan, who usually finds a way to get out of the pressure a little bit quicker than some other quarterbacks around in the Sun Belt. But I would imagine Petrino will have to keep an eye on Luton and will have eyes on him to see whether or not if he's ready to be playing or compete for the starting quarterback spot. Because right now, with Linehan's injury and a lot of stuff going on within the football program, I think at this point Petrino has to keep an eye on Luton. If he excels, I think he will. I wouldn't be surprised if he reevaluates the starting quarterback process. But if he has some of those same issues during spring and people notice it or continue to notice, then I think Linehan will keep the spot, but he's got to have to be fully healthy, nothing affecting him in a negative light.
And it's going to be hard to top Linehan just as far as the numbers that he put up, because Linehan's performance last year, I think, really solidified his place on the team. He had, 246 completions, completion percentage of 63% for almost 3,000 yards, falling just 28 yards short, 16 touchdowns. I mean, that's That's a solid performance right there. You're going to be hard pressed to find anybody in spring, either Jake or Amos, and just to be able to find. I don't know. I just don't think you can compete with those numbers, and especially with the success Linehan has had as a sophomore, and going into his junior year and senior year, he's only going to get better.
No, he will. He will get better. It's just like how he'll do. But the fact that he was able to perform with this kind of injury and tough it out for the remaining of the season, it shows you that nothing's going to stop Linehan. Obviously, he'll have to rest it. So I would imagine if Linehan could be healthy, the numbers would just get better and better. It would not surprise me one bit.
Now, moving on from Linehan's absence, there's another absence that the Vandals will have this spring. Quarterbacks coach Bryce Erickson left the program and was hired as the head coach at Lake City High School in Coeur d'Alene. Petrino said that the decision was made by Erickson as he considered his family obligations and that he wanted to be around his kids more. Not in his place, but as the result of a coaching loss, the Vandals hired former Bozeman High School head coach Troy Purcell as the inside linebacker coach, and I believe Petrino said he would take over the wide receiver duties and that Charlie Molnar will take over coaching duties at the quarterback position. So there's a little bit of shuffling around of the coaches as well as some of the players. But I guess some of the key battles that I'm sure a lot of Vandal fans are going to be looking at this spring. Number one, running back. Who replaces Elijah Penny?
Oh, it's going to be difficult. Elijah Penny was just really one of those running backs that is like that Idaho are thankful to have. He was really explosive last season, and it's like when you have the ball, give it to Penny. He will produce. It doesn't matter if it was big numbers or small numbers. He will find a way to produce numbers that will, at the end of the day, will really matter. It's going to be very difficult because Penny's one of those unique players that if you have him, he's going to be producing numbers no matter what's going on.
Penny rushed for 1,173 yards on 246 attempts for the Vandals last year. He had 10 touchdowns and a long of 68-yard touchdown rush. He averaged almost 100 yards per game. But in trying to find a replacement for the position, here's what the Vandals are looking at. They have 7 running backs on the roster. Only 2 are going to be upperclassmen next year. One of them is Aaron Duckworth, who was, I guess you could say, the backup to Penny this season. He had 73 attempts and gained only, I think it was 289 yards. He had a long of 31, and he rushed for 3 touchdowns. So a little bit of experience there, but obviously not consistent as far as seeing a lot of time on the gridiron. And he's the Vandal with the most experience at the position.
Yeah, obviously, when you have like an explosive running back or like a top running back like Elijah Penny, it's going to be hard for all the other running backs to get some sort of experience. The fact that Duckworth had this kind of experience, a couple of plays and a couple of rushing yards and scoring opportunities, that right now you would think he will be the primary, but obviously it is up in the air when you have that many running backs right now on your depth chart. He's got to have to fight for it and make a statement that, yes, I am the next running back. I'm here to prove it, just prove it and be a strong successor to Elijah Penny. That's what Duckworth has to go into and think.
But even looking at that, Duckworth's next closest competition is Isaiah Saunders, and Isaiah Saunders only had 13 attempts, 40 yards, and a long of 6. So that's like the closest competition. And then the other one is a redshirt Brantley, who didn't see any time for the Vandals. And then they're talking about the 4th running back Petrino thought might contribute to the offense being an incoming freshman in Dylan Thigpen.
Yeah, you just have that many. It's gonna be fun to watch to see who's gonna have to step it up. That's what like spring football is. I know some people will say like, what's the purpose of spring sports? This is one of the reasons why it means something, because you have positions on the line, especially when you have that running game and you have this several players in the hunt for it, that it's going to be one of those situations that you need to keep an eye on during the spring. So we'll know going into summer and into the regular season who will be the running back and see whether or not he can produce numbers. Obviously, it's going to be a tough shoes to fill without Penny.
Exactly. And looking at some of the stats, I mean, these guys, they are young, but they had some good high school years. Saunders was the former MVP of the Sunset League and honestly could be a potential dual threat because he did have some receiving prowess. I think it was 7 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and 160 yards, I believe. And the other recruit, Thigpen, led the baseline league with almost, it was like 1,850 yards on 260 carries for Damien High School. So these guys see a lot of high school experience, but there definitely is a transition from high school to the collegiate level. The game is faster. These guys hit harder. Everyone is stronger. And that's something that these guys are going to learn very, very quickly.
It's good. It will definitely be like a waking call, especially when Sigpen comes into the field in the next couple of months. It's just going to be. They'll realize that it's not walking on rainbows. It's going to be tough. You have to find a way to tough it out and become more stronger in the style of collegiate football as it is.
Exactly, and the running back position, they have this inexperience, but if you're looking at this, in contrast, their passing game was really, really strong last year, but I guess the receiving battle is also questionable because Desmond Epps left the program last year. There was a string of incidents, and Petrino just said, we're done with it, we're done, let him go. And we had some Vandals step up, but I still think that it's going to be an interesting situation as to what happens. Looked at Idaho last year as this kind of offense being their power, in that they had a really strong passing attack, and then because of the passing attack, it opened up the chance to run sometimes and catch the defense off guard. But now their running game is going to be very inexperienced at least for the first few games, and so that puts more pressure on Matt Linehan and the offense. But then if you look at this, some guys stepping up, a lot of tight ends, and you really need a receiver, like a solid receiver, 2 or 3 to step up. And it's kind of like looking at some of the guys last year. Desmond Epps obviously led the team, but he's left the program with some of those off-field issues. Then you have Kalen Hightower, 749 yards on 57 receptions. Cowan, I believe he's the tight end, 624 yards, 48 receptions, and then Deion Watson, and then Elijah Penny. So kind of it's good to see a mix of different position players that are contributing to the receiving game, but the fact that we don't have like a couple stand-out receivers yet, that would be something else to watch this spring.
Yeah, you need to have a go-to guy, and what I saw a couple of the games last year, seems like I mentioned it multiple times when it's like the chemistry between Linehan when he passes it to Cowan, it usually produces explosive numbers, especially in third down situations. So I think this is one of those this is the time of their collegiate football career, especially for Cowan, that he's got to really wants to step up. If he really wants to be more explosive than one or two times throughout the game, would be getting those numbers on a number of occasions in one game. This has got to be this time that he got to step up and prove that he's not like a quote-unquote one big play guy every time we're on the field or in a third down situation. He's got to be a little bit more, really go out there a lot more.
True. So it'll be interesting to see how the Vandals respond this spring and then in the fall as far as their offense goes, that being kind of the anchor of the team last year, and it allowed the Vandals to compete in those shootout games when their defense wasn't quite up to par. But if their offense isn't quite as strong as it was last year, that'll be something to watch. But speaking of defense, I guess another position battle that'll be intriguing to watch is that at the defensive line. I know the Vandals struggled with the running game last year, containing the running game, and that was really evident in their game against, I believe it was Appalachian State that we covered.
I think it might have been that particular game where, like I mentioned, a little side note, it's like that was one of the things we kind of tend to question or a little bit criticize is like how covering the defense, especially in the running game when they just blew by us. And I mentioned it a lot of times that there's so much that Quentin Bradley or Tony Lupermano can do that they need a lot more people to stop the running game. It's like they could do so much. And that really hurt Idaho, especially in those couple games where it came down to the wire that they had the lead going in the fourth quarter or had an opportunity to stay close with those tough opponents like Appalachian State.
Very true. But yeah, spring practices are starting up, and yesterday's was open to the media, but today's and tomorrow's will be closed. I believe Monday they open it back up to the media. And then on a side note, I saw for any of the Vandal fans who are listening from the LC Valley that the Vandals will be, I guess, scrimmaging at the Lewiston High School field April 2nd, so not tomorrow, but the next coming Saturday, hosting a scrimmage down there. I think that'll be really interesting for any Vandal alum in the area to kind of get a look at some of these young guys, especially at the quarterback position with Jake Luton and Gunnar Amos. But I guess we can shift our attention now to men's lacrosse. The Idaho club team took on Nevada this afternoon at Sprint Turf. Kind of a interesting setting as far as the weather, hailing, raining, sun, just kind of all over the place.
It was everything. It's kind of and I can definitely relate because when I covered the game in Gonzaga, it was exciting. The difference was night, but it was like tremendous. It was like the most bipolar weather I've ever seen, and today was no exception.
Yeah, it was all over the place, and kind of an interesting matchup for the Vandals. When you covered them earlier in the year, Luis, you talked about how they looked almost lethargic in the second half because of conditioning. They weren't quite ready, you felt like, and it seemed like that was the opposite case today. They were down 11-8 at halftime, and they stormed back, scored 11 goals in the second half, and won the game 19-15 over Nevada.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that when I spoke to guys like AJ Grabble in particular, it's like some of them had not had that collegiate level. It's a lot quicker, a lot more aggressive. They hit hard, really hard, and it was the opening game. It was the first game of the season. Now I believe this is their 6th or 7th game because this was their second win of the season. And when we played them, it was the opening game. That they are really aggressive and it attracts a lot of people. It's like it's one of those things that you have to see to believe, especially when the crowd involvement gets really amped up, especially when it's like in these conditions that we had today.
Yeah, and I think it was really cool to see that Grant Hill and Andrew Spangler were the two standouts for the Vandals. I know you talked about AJ Gravel kind of being the man for the team.
The team captain.
As of late, I've just made by his play on the field that he's really been excelling, and the fact that Hill and Spangler contributed, I think, for 11 of Idaho's 19 goals is fantastic. Talked to him after the game. They really described a chemistry between the two. They both live together at the same Greek house, and so they have a lot of connections, and they say that translates over the field where they can see plays together and set up opportunities for one another, not just scoring opportunities for themselves.
And that's what really helps. Hill was another one when I covered them that he had produced a couple of key numbers and goals. It's like he was like the other key factor of the Gonzaga game, even throughout the season, that I've noticed that Hill can be out there. But when you have that kind of chemistry, especially if they both live in the Greek house and talk about strategy rather than waiting for the opportunity arises, that will really help the team and it really work. Obviously, some of the results are there because they're competing with tougher teams and bigger schools, but it's always important to have that kind of chemistry because you don't sometimes when it's like I don't know how would you describe it, like a really sometimes machismo sport like lacrosse can be sometimes, or a really aggressive sport. Sometimes it's like chemistry has got to be there, but when you have like a bondage like you're mentioning, it's kind of like you don't see it very often unless you know or close to them to understand the kind of chemistry they bring to the table, and that's really really nice to hear when you have that kind of chemistry, especially in a game like lacrosse.
Yeah, and you talked about kind of the physical play. That was something that Nevada felt like the Vandals were being too physical. I was sitting over there by the sidelines because I was on a photography assignment for the story as well, and I could hear the Nevada players, and every single time they came off the field, they were complaining that they weren't getting the right calls because they were being shoved too much. And watching the game, and I have some film of the game that I was going over, and Idaho just looks like they're always bodying up the Wolfpack team members, hitting them hard right from the start. And I know it drew a couple flags at some points and some penalties, but overall, I thought it was definitely a dominating performance, especially in the second half when usually teams get a little bit tired.
Oh, absolutely. And when you're talking about like they're really aggressive, they are. It's like what they say is Vandal lacrosse. They just get really aggressive. That's like if they're willing to, they're not afraid. They're simple as that. They're really not afraid to tackle because that's how you got to go in. You got to go. You pretty much have to go in and be really aggressive. You can't really complain much if you're feeling that way. The best thing to probably do is just match it up and then kind of like sort of suck it up and match it and even it up a little bit and to kind of send the message out there. If the fact that you mentioned they didn't, then Idaho really got the best of them for sure, and especially in that second half.
Yeah. So the Vandals come away with a 19-15 victory over Nevada. Here at home, I believe, Luis, you said they have one more home spring game this year.
Yep, April 16th against Montana. That's going to be a really interesting one. It will be at the Sprint Turf. Right now, it is scheduled at 1 p.m. on Saturday, but you can never know when they schedule because sometimes, like when you on the MCLA website, it will tell you what certain time periods, and they never usually match, especially the Sprint Turf game. So it will not surprise me if it's going to be a Saturday night game, especially a game like Montana.
Right, a little bit of a rivalry factor to it, but we will be covering that as well and bringing you the latest news as far as the lacrosse team. But I guess, Luis, in the final couple minutes of our program, we can talk some March Madness. Watching the games last night, I felt like I was a little bit disappointed that they weren't more competitive. I think the average was, I don't know, like 15-point victory in all the games.
It was lackluster. Like
very boring from a fan's perspective.
No, it was lackluster. Like you would think that Maryland was going to be a threat to Kansas. I thought that Kansas' biggest threat was going to be Maryland just a little bit, but it was kind of like the one that I was really surprised was Texas A&M just got pretty much humiliated against Oklahoma. I originally had Texas A&M as my dark horse, but in my bracket I had Oklahoma because I wasn't entirely sure because because if I were to consider Oklahoma as a dark horse because they were more of a higher ranked seed than say the Aggies. But
right.
I'm telling you, Oklahoma could pose a possible threat to knock Kansas out of the tournament. It will not surprise me based on how they did against like a top-notch team like the Aggies. That Oklahoma probably is going to be a feared team in the left side of the bracket.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, Oklahoma is very good, and especially Buddy Hield, just absolutely raising his draft stock and leading the Sooners. Absolutely superb shooting out there. I think another team to watch is Indiana. And don't get me wrong, I know they're a 5 seed. I think they're a little bit of a sleeper pick, and I'm going to explain why. They beat number 4 Kentucky. Kentucky was in the title last year, but were they? No, I don't know. Kentucky had a very strong team last year.
They might have. I'm trying to remember.
No. They lost in the Final Four, I believe.
Okay, then it was a couple years ago.
They had a very strong program, but they upset them this year. And also, I was looking at some of the stats. Indiana ranks second in the country in points per game. They average 82.3 points per game. They possess a shooting average of 50% from the field. And I know their weakness is turnovers, but I feel like this team, if they get hot, they can compete with anybody. But they have to be hot. They have to be shooting like Steph Curry if they're gonna compete with Oklahoma or anybody else that they face.
Yeah, they got. I think don't they play like Carolina like in this coming round? I think they play Carolina, so right there, that's gonna be when they have to really step it up and not kind of be hot. They got to be hot now. I think they're playing. I'm pretty sure Carolina plays Indiana. I'm pretty sure like right now or in a few minutes. I know what was it? Virginia is going on right now, but I would Indiana was another one that I thought could be a dark horse besides Maryland, but I wasn't entirely sure because they were facing Carolina, who I have in my Final Four with Michigan State gone. I think I had Carolina as my next option, but at this point it's like, who's going to go on the right side of the bracket is really unpredictable right now on the right side. The left side, not so much because you have the guys that you pretty much expected to be in the Elite Eight are there.
And I know a lot of people are talking about Gonzaga kind of being the Cinderella story. To be honest, I think they were a little bit underrated coming into the tournament. Gonzaga's been a very strong program every year in and year out.
Yeah.
And I've had some... I don't know. I haven't liked the program in recent years because I feel like they don't schedule opponents that they need to schedule. I mean, they always play like 1 or 2 games against a big-name opponent, but then they get to conference play, and they don't face very good competition. I'll say that about their conference. And then they get into the NCAA tournament. They have like an easy opening game, and then they almost always get like upset. But they face somebody, they face a very good team or decent team, and it's like they're surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, like teams are good again.
But I'm like, when it comes to Gonzaga, it's like you could sort of expect. I would not really consider it as a Cinderella team because they usually make it every year. It seems like so. It's like as Gonzaga basketball, they find a way to make it and at least make it into the Sweet 16. It's now it's like you mentioned, can they schedule really tough opponents that could match their style of play or match their level to see how good they can be, and that those kind of games will really motivate them down the stretch, especially if they want to make it further into the tournament, which they haven't been able to since like a decade ago.
Right.
When they had that top guy that was I forget, it was in that NCAA EA Sports cover a while back. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Gonzaga, it's an infamous Gonzaga lore. And
Adam Morrison?
Yes. It's been around that time since they made it that far into the postseason. It's been a long time. That's the thing.
And you know, with the winner of the Gonzaga-Syracuse game is going to be considered the Cinderella underdog. Let's everybody in the nation root for him. But to be honest, I'm kind of hoping Syracuse pulls out this victory. I think, honestly, Gonzaga is underrated, and they're the better team. But I hope Syracuse, they've put together a little bit of a surprising tournament run, and I'd like to see it keep going.
Yeah, I think I have them out in this round. I don't remember who I have probably some team that's already been eliminated. I think it might have been, I don't know. But, yeah, I think Syracuse will probably not surprise me if they beat them off, especially when you look at the brackets. I know all of them has pretty much been all but dead, especially in the first round. Now, yeah, it would not surprise me, but deep inside, obviously, I have a lot of people that I know from the Spokane area that are probably going to be rooting for them, but I think I would have to agree. Gonzaga will probably fall short, and I would not really consider them as a Cinderella team because they usually are there. It's like, can they beat like a Carolina or a Virginia? Then yes, we can probably consider that and realize their strong potential that they can deliver.
Okay. Luis, in the closing minutes, real quick here, give me your predictions for tonight's game. Number 4, Iowa State, and number 1, Virginia.
I think I have Virginia winning that one, and I think I have them beat, but I'm going to go with Virginia.
I'm going to say Virginia by 8 points. Next game, Wisconsin, number 7 seed, versus Notre Dame, number 6 seed.
Wisconsin. I'm surprised Notre Dame made it that far. I think their run ends right here.
I don't know. I'm torn on this. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to come down to probably the final 45 seconds. I think one team will begin to pull ahead there. But, I liked Wisconsin last year. They were strong. I don't know if they can do it this year. Notre Dame kind of has been having a little bit of magic. So
They got
I think Notre Dame wins by 2.
Yeah, it's like they got humiliated in a conference postseason game. That's why I actually had them out earlier than the Sweet 16. I think I had them upsetted in the first or second round.
Yeah.
Still, that's why I think their run ends. But at this point, it's like either way, it's going to be close.
Yep. Number 11, Gonzaga. Number 10, Syracuse.
We pretty much kind of already discussed it. We're going with
Gonzaga.
Syracuse.
I think Gonzaga wins by 7. And then the final game, number 5, Indiana, number 1, North Carolina.
That one is going to be too close to call. Since I have Carolina in my Final Four, I'm going to have to stick with it. But if Indiana wins, I would not be necessarily mad, because I'm relying on the left side in the bracket for the March Madness.
I think it's all going to depend on how Indiana comes out. If they come out strong, it'll be a close game, and I think it'll go down to the final 2 minutes. If not, then I think North Carolina takes advantage of early momentum and really runs away with the victory. So that's essentially all the time that we have today for our program. We'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. Not sure if I will be here Sunday, but Luis says he probably will. So we will host a show on Easter Sunday at 11 a.m. So tune in to that. Also, here is our shameless self-promotion. Please visit our website, www.thevandalnation.com, to read all of our latest articles and profiles and features, or you can pick up an Argonaut around campus. Also, you can find us on Twitter, at Vandal Nation. We tweet the latest news, sports, and updates, and that's the quickest way to hear the latest news on our programs. We also have an Instagram where we highlight our photographers and their latest assignments, and that is the Vandal Nation. So be sure to check us out on social media, and we will be back this Sunday. So have a safe weekend, Vandal fans.
Let's not before we sign out. You want to know how we're gonna cover it? Make sure to follow us, follow the Twitter and on Instagram. So likewise we'll have track and field coverage. They'll kick off their outdoor season.
Yes, very true.
At 11:45 a.m. is when the track activities start, but as early as 9 a.m. with the field activities. Make sure you support your fellow Vandals, as this is the second and last home meet for the track and field team this season.
Yes. Also, keep an eye out. A potential Snapchat or Periscope may come up for Vandal Nation at some point soon. But thank you guys for tuning in. Have a safe weekend, and enjoy the weather.
This bipolar weather till we meet again.